Okay, we're talking about the immune system. We talked about the lymph system last time, trying to take away all these diseases that you have. And of course, anytime you get an infection, your lymph nodes will swell up, your tonsils, you get tonsillitis or whatever, or your lymph nodes will swell up when you get an infection. You cut your leg and you get an infection, and all this stuff kind of happens. Your first line of defense actually in your immune system is your skin.
I'm sorry, Bruce, but this seems like all off.
Is it?
Yeah.
That, you know who we should blame for that?
Yeah.
Yeah, but she's gone, so we won't worry about it. Oh, you kicked it.
No, I think.
I know, it's Denise.
Yeah, it was her.
She's such a troublemaker. So the first line of defense is actually your skin. Your skin is really tight knit together, and this is a good thing because as we wander around and run in, I've got I got a splinter in my hand from the wood I was handling last night. You know, if this is the best way that we can protect ourselves is with thick skin, and as humans, of course, we do have thick skins to some extent. The skin is a tightly knit, multi-layered cell mass that covers the entire body. It is able to keep bacteria out of our system because everything is covered. But not only is it covered with skin that keeps all the bad stuff out, but there's also oils that come out of our pores that kill bacteria. They actually will destroy bacteria. So if you've got all this oil on your skin, this is good stuff. The oil on your skin, it's antibacterial. Not only does sebum keep the skin moist, but it contains antibacterial properties that prevent growth of bacteria. So bacteria will not just grow on your hands, or fungus, or fungi. These things are all wiped out by the antibacterial and antifungal agents from your skin. And these are all good things. This isn't the only antibacterial substances in our bodies. Our tears are also antibacterial, and that's a good thing. The second line of defense is a covering of the nose, the eyes, the mouth, and respiratory tract, a tough covering made of epithelial cells and mucus-producing cells called the mucous membrane, and the mucous membrane is good, because otherwise we'd have colds all the time, all the bacteria would get into our systems, and of course they can't because we got all this snot that protects us, all this mucus that protects us. So when you're running and your mouth gets dry and you cough up a little bit of phlegm, that's good stuff. That's really good stuff. You need all the mucus you can get.
I hear that's a sign of dehydration.
If you can't cough and cough anything up, then that's dehydration. Okay. But this is good stuff. I mean, every time you blow your nose, you should thank the heavens that you have all this mucus in there that's protecting you. Because if you didn't blow your nose, then maybe you get a cold, or you get pneumonia, or you get something else. All kinds of bad things can potentially happen if we didn't have all this mucus in our systems. I hate to talk about Uranus, but of course the reality is it's down there as well. I'm not talking about the planet Uranus. I'm talking about that portion of your body where you defecate from. This is good stuff. This is what keeps us healthy. Females, for example, have mucous membranes covering the inside of their vaginal openings. This is a good thing because the mucus, of course, protects us from bacteria, protects us from viruses and whatnot. It also, if you are female, humans would have died out a long time ago, except their reproductive tract, which is very delicate tissue, which anything would want to get into so that it could infect that area. It's very acidic, and since it's acidic, bacteria can't grow in there, viruses can't grow in there. It's just one of these really, really super positive things that we never think about because it's so gross. Snot, we're talking about your anus, we're talking about vaginal openings, we're talking about things where things could potentially infect your body, but people hardly ever get infections.
Would that be a reason why they're more prone to getting like yeast infections or?
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because see, yeast isn't killed off by acidity like bacteria and viruses are. So yeah, would be more prone to yeast infections. The individuals that are more prone to yeast infections are the ones with less acidic vaginal areas, as curious as that is. I know. I know, this is all fun stuff. So we have all of these wonderful things that are protecting us. This is part of our immune system. Mucous membrane of the respiratory tract is covered with cilia that catch dust, microbes, and other foreign material so that you can cough it up. So if you see somebody spitting a big glob of snot, don't go, oh my God, that's gross. The reality is that's a good thing. There you go. That's a good thing that Kevin could cough, because then you're coughing up all that dust and stuff. It's not getting down into your lungs. It's not getting you infected. Once upon a time in the United States, we had what was referred to as the Dust Bowl. And there was all kinds of dust floating through the air. I guess you guys have had dust storms over the last couple of years. I don't know, they had them down in Phoenix anyway. Dust storms that would roll through, and people would cover their mouths and try to get inside where there wasn't any dust. That's a good thing. You need to do that, because if you get too much dust in your lungs, you get what is called silicaitis. It's a buildup of silica. Dust is made up of is silica. And if you get too much of it in your lungs, it will kind of clog things up, and then you get pneumonia and die, which is not fun at all. They lost lots and lots of little kids during the Dust Bowl because they breathed too much dust particles, too many dust particles, and then they die. Animals did this all the time. You know, cattle that they had outside, they keel over and die of this silica buildup in their lungs. So this isn't a good thing. We need to protect ourselves as much as we can. Enzymes in your tears and saliva also will destroy bacteria. I don't know if you've ever seen Harry Potter. Harry Potter? Okay. At one point, somebody dies. Who dies? It's Harry Potter gets wounded, and the phoenix comes flying around, and it cries on his wound, and the wound heals. I know this is a story, but the reality is that tears have an antibacterial enzyme in there, and they can actually help you heal.
Is it like urine?
I'm sorry?
Is urine like that?
Urine isn't like that. Urine is waste product.
You know, like when you get stung like by a jellyfish or something like that?
Yeah, the reason that you're peeing on yourself, or whoever you're peeing on, is because your urine is alkaline, and it neutralizes the sting. The sting is acidic, so you're trying to neutralize it, and that's why it works. Okay. Another trick. Are you ready for this? So you can cry on people and heal them, which is kind of cool. So your tears actually have antibacterial properties. The other things that have antibacterial properties is your earwax. I know. So if you get some kind of a wound on your face, or maybe a herpes outbreak, you can take your earwax and wipe it on there, and it will decrease the effect of the virus. Herpes is caused by varicella zoster, but you can wipe your earwax on there. Or you can cry on it if you can work up that many tears and just wipe it on there. And it heals it. It makes it heal faster. Isn't that exciting? Or not. You can do whatever you want.
Sell my earwax.
I know, yes. Now here's the funny thing. My earwax isn't the same as your earwax. There's two types of earwax. Do you ever get globs of earwax coming out? Does that ever happen to you?
Sometimes. Like it's just like flaky.
It's like flaky, okay. There's a reason why yours is flaky.
Like sticky,
Mine's
like
not.
really sticky.
Yeah, see, mine comes out in globs. Yeah, there's wet earwax and dry earwax. I know. American Indians have dry earwax. So when I talk about earwax, you guys are going, what the hell are you talking about? But if you're if you're of European descent or African descent, then you have wet earwax, so it comes out in globs. Did you ever see Ren and Stimpy?
Mhm.
Okay. Didn't one of them have an earwax collection?
I can't remember.
See,
Well,
that's
all
important
kind of-
stuff. See, this is important stuff, and he doesn't even remember.
So, Red and Snippy, they were more Caucasian than anything?
Well, if they had wet if he was collecting earwax that came out of his ears, yeah, he was white, because white people have wet earwax instead of dry earwax. So you guys probably don't have the same problems. I mean, I can take a Q-tip and stick it in my ear, and I get globs of yellow stuff. You don't do that? See, you guys don't know how to have a good time, obviously. My wife and I have contests to see who has more earwax. She wins every time. I haven't quite figured that one out. When a pathogen enters the body and gets past the skin and digestive tract, it's covering of proteins alerts the circulatory immune function that an alien structure must be neutralized. It is the proteins on the bacteria, it's on the viruses, it's on everything. Everything's made up of proteins. And because of that, it tells the immune system that it needs to attack something. Specialized lymphocytes called phagocytes and macrophages flood the area to engulf the alien structure. This is really kind of an interesting picture because these are white cells that have engulfed bacteria. Isn't that cool? Here's one that hasn't done anything, but here's one that has one. This one doesn't have any, this one doesn't have any. But you can see these three are all full of bacteria. That's because they are phagocytic. They have engulfed the bacteria and they have taken them into the white cell so that it cannot infect anybody. Isn't that fun? Okay.
Is that like...
This stuff is, I know, this is a picture of gonorrhea. And the reason I have a picture of gonorrhea is because it's the most obvious. I've seen this over and over and over again, unfortunately. Military personnel, you know, they have sex with the wrong person.
I don't know.
And they come
I can't
down with
relate,
gonorrhea. Don't ask Scott, okay?
everywhere.
This was my job in the service. I identified gonorrhea.
So that's what it looks like under a microscope?
That's what it looks like under a microscope. This is the same stuff. This is gonorrhea. So what happens is when somebody has the clap, gonorrhea, what happens is that all this is taking place and it creates pus. And the pus is in their urethra. And then they squeeze the pus out and we put it on a slide. And then we look at it to see if this is what we see.
And this is common in military?
Well, I was in service in Vietnam and Germany after Vietnam was over with. So, I mean, it was relatively common. Relatively common. You know how military guys are. They think they want to have sex with, anything or anyone. And sometimes they pick the wrong individual to have sex with. So they come down with gonorrhea. I knew one guy that every week he came in with gonorrhea, and every week it was the same lady that he had had sex with. This guy was so dumb. How dumb was he? He was so dumb that he kept having sex with the lady that gave him gonorrhea. And we just treated him the week before and told him not to have sex with her anymore. And what did he do? Men are so stupid sometimes.
They are.
Oh my God. So we treated him over and over and over again. We finally had to give him an Article 15, destruction of military property, in order to get him to stop. We tried to arrest the lady, but she was a civilian, and we couldn't do anything about it. And we told the civilian authorities, and they thought it was funny. So there was nothing we could do about it. Except order him to stay on base.
I know that like out here, I think it's chlamydia and syphilis.
Okay. Okay. Chlamydia looks a lot like this. It's not nearly as bad. It doesn't scar your urethra like gonorrhea does. Gonorrhea causes open sores inside your urethra. It's really relatively destructive. If you have chlamydia, it's not nearly this bad. For the guy, for the lady, it's worse because it can get into her. She can get pelvic inflammatory disease where the whole vaginal area swells up, and that's life-threatening. But it doesn't. I mean, it doesn't happen to guys. All their gonorrhea is in their penis.
So here now at the clinic, I think if you're 13 and over, they'll ask you, do you want to take a STI test?
Oh, okay.
So.
Okay. They put it on a chocolate plate, on a plate that looks like chocolate.
I don't know.
It's called a Thayer Martin. It's got special stuff in it to just grow gonorrhea. It's kind of cool. That's what I did in the service. I identified gonorrhea. Oh, what a great job that was. When a pathogen is introduced into the body, a break in the skin, the cell in the area, that's the wrong one. No, that's the wrong one. That's the right one. Try to protect themselves by releasing chemicals that isolate the area and try to combat the infection. And this is what happens with gonorrhea. Of course, what are we isolating? We're isolating the reproductive tract. Now, the reproductive tract in men is really complex. You've got all of these different things that pump alkaline substances into the semen so that they can reproduce. Remember, women protect themselves with an acidic reproductive area. In order for the sperm to get all the way into the fallopian tubes, the male has to neutralize the acidity. And the way he neutralizes the acidity is with an alkaline semen. The semen is very alkaline. And if it's not alkaline enough, he will not be able to neutralize the acidity of the female vaginal area, and he will not be able to impregnate her. So we've got all of these, we've got three different structures inside the male reproductive area that are pumping alkaline juices into the semen to make it more alkaline. And one of them, of course, is the prostate, the Cowper's gland, and then the vas deferens is the third, I think. Anyway, there's three of them. Is this all good news? It is good news unless you get gonorrhea, because gonorrhea will scar the entire reproductive tract. And then all of a sudden, he can't reproduce because the scar tissue is keeping all of these alkaline juices from getting into the semen, so it's not properly alkaline. And that's what happens with men with gonorrhea. Sometimes they're impotent. They lose their viability. They can't reproduce. If they get gonorrhea too many times, like that idiot that came in every week with gonorrhea. I had a lab officer, one of my friends, when he was in Vietnam, he contracted gonorrhea 3 times. And he was trying to reproduce with his wife, who had just married. He just married this lady, and they wanted to have a baby, but he couldn't do it. He couldn't produce the semen that was alkaline enough in order to reproduce with this lady, as weird as that is. So he couldn't reproduce. So
he didn't know?
He didn't know he'd had gonorrhea? Sure, he knew he had gonorrhea. Did he know that he had made himself a non-reproductive male? No, he didn't realize that.
So how were they able to determine that was the cause of him not being able to reproduce?
It was so easy. We got a semen specimen from him, and we took a dipstick, and we found out how alkaline his semen was. And it wasn't very alkaline at all. Something was blocked. Something was messed up. So we knew that he couldn't reproduce.
And then it was just determined that it was from the gonorrhea? That's what I'm saying?
Well, that was the
How
assumption.
that? Oh, okay.
That was the assumption, because he had had it 3 times.
Or he could have just been sterile his whole life.
It's possible that he was sterile all of his life, probably not. Not if he'd had gonorrhea 3 times. That's a good cause of sterility. Thank you. I couldn't think of the word sterile. Okay, so we're pumping, so we've got an infection, right? And so we're pumping chemicals into the area. And one of those chemicals that we pump into the area is histamine. It increases the blood flow to the area to destroy the pathogen with heat. Most bacteria they are very fastidious. One of the reasons you get a fever is because bacteria want to be at 98.6. That's your normal temperature. But if you're at 102, then, or if that area is at 102 degrees, the bacteria can't, it actually can't reproduce. It usually doesn't kill it, it just cannot reproduce. And of course, bacteria don't live that long, so if it's hot in that area for an extended length of time, the bacteria will die. It naturally dies anyway, but it will die and it won't be able to reproduce.
So how can you relate that to cancer or chemo?
What?
That heat?
The heat?
Yeah.
Usually with chemo, we're not talking about heat. We're talking about toxins. We're talking about poisons. So we're trying to poison the cancer. We're trying to starve it out. Cancers grow because they have all of this blood coming into them. And so what we're trying to do with a cancer is we're trying to slow that down, the whole process.
So it's like white blood cells, like an antidote to fighting cancers or fighting different bacteria?
Yes and no. Cancer starts out in a select area. And at that point, we can fight that cancer with white cells, with your immune system, to try to knock it out. Now, what cancer will do is that it will move. And the only way it can move, because your body knows that it's an alien structure, what the cancer has to do, it has to take on a chemical that tells you that it is not an alien structure. And that's what happens. The cancer will start producing human chorionic gonadotropin, which is a substance that tells the immune system that this is not an alien structure, then it shouldn't be killed. We're going to talk about human chorionic gonadotropin in a minute. But after that, of course, the only way we can kill it is by poisoning it. But before that, we can marshal your immune system to try to knock that cancer out. Normally, people get cancers because they're immunocompromised. So what we have to do is put you in a situation where your immune system is as strong as it possibly can be. We'll shoot you full of steroids, which builds up your immune system, and possibly that will knock out the cancer. If we can catch it in the first place that it is, then we're okay. We'll talk about human chorionic gonadotropin in a minute. This is what babies protect themselves with. Babies, no matter whether they're boys or girls, are alien structures. Half of their genes aren't your genes. Half of their genes are, but half of them aren't. So this is like a parasite. All babies are parasites. Don't write that down. Because the body thinks that it's something alien. It is. It's something alien growing in your body. So the baby, in order to protect itself from the mother's immune system, has to produce a chemical that tells her not to kill it. And that substance is human chorionic gonadotropin.
Could that be the cause of like miscarriages?
Tons of different reasons for miscarriages. Your uterus isn't prepared for a pregnancy. The baby doesn't attach itself properly to the uterine wall. I mean, there's lots of different reasons. Probably it's not human chorionic gonadotropin. Almost all zygotes produce human chorionic gonadotropin. And that's the way we know that you're pregnant, because that's what a pregnancy test is. It measures human chorionic gonadotropin. Some babies don't produce a lot of human chorionic gonadotropin. So instead of being able to pee on a stick, and find out if you're pregnant, we have to draw their blood in order to find out if they're pregnant. And then we'll get these questionable results. And the baby won't start producing enough human chorionic gonadotropin until later on in the pregnancy. So, yes and no. It's a possibility. It's not very high. Usually it's something else. Women who have sex every month, when they're ovulating, they still don't get pregnant every month. It doesn't work that way. Something is keeping them from getting pregnant, not just birth control pills or condoms or whatever you're using, IUDs. Usually it's the fact that it wasn't perfect. Has to be perfect for the baby to grow.
Some women are like super fertile.
I know.
Like,
Well, every month
Really fertile.
it's perfect. So every month there's a possibility of getting
Dang.
pregnant. This is the women that have dozens and dozens, dozens and dozens of babies.
So the women that are more fertile, are they more, I guess, sexually?
Every month, that's
sexually
the perfect
active?
time. Because
Yeah.
I don't know.
See, there's women ovulate, and when they ovulate, it's possible to get them pregnant at that time if you have sex at that time. Or if you have, when women ovulate, they're viable, they can have a baby. If the male has sex with her before she ovulates, then the sperm are already going to be in the area, and when she ovulates, it's possible that she'll get pregnant. Afterwards, it takes time for that ova to move down. If she has sex after she ovulates, then it's possible for her to get pregnant. So there's this window. She has a window of, it all depends on how old she is and how viable her ova are as to how big that window is. When she's really young, when she's 14 or 15 and she just started to ovulate, she's viable for like 5 or 6 days. I mean, it's really long. As she gets older, of course, the ova, her window of opportunity of getting pregnant is less.
I have a question, and this just has to do with like when people draw blood, because like it's interesting that they can know so much about what's going on inside of your body by just looking at your blood. Like they can look at your cholesterol, look at your liver enzymes, check your thyroid.
Sure.
And like how does that testing work?
It's all chemistry tests.
So they just like put it in different.
Yeah.
It's just really interesting.
Sure, and there's just dozens of different tests we can do.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll take a drop of your serum and we'll put it in with select chemicals. And that's a liver function test, or it's a thyroid test, or it's a glucose test, or a kidney function test.
Mm-hmm.
And we can do that with just small, very tiny amounts of specimen.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I first started in the lab, this was my job, was testing all this stuff. So when I first started, we didn't have all those micro tests for all these chemical tests. So sometimes if you wanted to do a BUN, which is a kidney function, it took a ml of serum. It took a whole glob of a whole bucket full of serum. And then if you wanted to do a glucose, that took a half a ml. And then if you wanted to do electrolytes, that took another ml. So we'd have to draw these huge tubes of blood off of people. And hopefully they had enough serum in there that we could do all these tests. And we had to draw enough blood so that if the test was abnormal, we could run it again. So we draw tube after tube after tube out of people.
Well, let's just hope that those people had somebody that knew how to draw blood.
I know.
Because it's terrible.
Do you have bad veins?
No. Like, I've never had problem drawing blood, and when I got sick, they just decided to run these tests, and the guy could not freaking, like, find my vein. And so my arm got all bruised up, and I'm just like, what the heck?
Nobody's ever had problems with me before. What the hell's wrong with you?
Uh-huh.
When you're sick, of course,
Uh-huh.
your blood pressure goes down, and you're much harder to draw.
Yeah.
See, that was my specialty when I was drawing blood. I was really good at it because I'm real stable.
Uh-huh.
You know, a lot of people, they got a little bit of a tremor going on, so when they're drawing blood, they're kind of shaking a little bit. It's not as easy for them to put that needle in there and hold it in the right place.
Yeah. It's just really interesting.
It was fun, I had a good time. And I was good at it, so made me happy. There we go. Okay, so we got all these chemicals. One of them is, of course, histamine. Histamine draws these phagocytes and macrophages to the area, and it tells the immune system, hey, you need to get these these white cells down here so that it can take in all that gonorrhea bacteria. The release of histamine, the arrival of the engulfing lymphocytes, and the swelling are all parts of the inflammatory response. So we got histamine in there, we've got all these white cells that are marshaling into the area, and we have heat. If you've ever hurt yourself, then you can feel the area, and that portion of your leg or wherever you hurt was hotter than everything else. I went home 2 Christmases ago, is that correct? 2 Christmases? Yeah, 2 Christmases ago. And I looked at my wife, like a good husband, I looked at my wife, and she was sitting there, and she had a red spot on her leg. And I said, do you have an infection? And she said, I don't think so. I scratched myself up here, but it's nothing. Like my wife always says, it's nothing. So I felt it, and it was warm to the touch. And it looked like it was a little bit swollen. Now, she thinks she's fat, so she never sees anything like that. She would never notice that this was swollen. But I did, because I'm a good husband, and, you know, I saw that it was red, and I felt it, and it was hot, and it looked a little swollen to me. And I said, you know, honey, darling, I think maybe you've got an infection, and we need to go into the emergency room. And she said, that's okay, I've got a doctor's appointment on Monday. This is on Friday. Then I've got a doctor's appointment on Friday. And I said, you know, that looks like cellulitis to me, and I think we need to go to the emergency room right now. Cellulitis. Cellulitis is a septicemic infection. Septicemic means it's in your blood. Cellulitis can kill you, and it kills you pretty quick because, well, all of these things are taking place en masse with large areas of your body. So we went to the emergency room, and I said, I think it's cellulitis. Thank God I said I think it's cellulitis. Otherwise, the doctor wouldn't have looked at it at all, because, you know, doctors are dumb. Doctors only hear what they want to hear. Cellulitis means this is a really serious infection. It needs to be taken care of right now. And so I mentioned the word cellulitis. He realized that maybe I had a little bit of medical knowledge that he couldn't, you know, drift around. So he looked at it and he said, you know, I think you do have cellulitis. About that time, my wife's face exploded. I mean, she got this swelling in her face. Anyway, it had spread from her leg up into her face, because cellulitis is septicemic. It's in your blood. So you're going to get an infection wherever you are weak. And in her case, she doesn't walk a lot. She didn't at that time anyway, because she just had 2 hip surgeries. Or her hips were hurting her. This must have been 3 Christmases ago. It was before she had her hip surgery. Anyway, she didn't move a lot, so it had moved from her calf up into her face. And of course, that's obvious.
It was just like a rash?
No, it's swelling. It's accumulation of pus, accumulation of fluid. Actually, it's accumulation of fluid. It's not really pus. It's edema that gets into that area. But the area is hot to the touch. So what they needed to do was treat her with broad-spectrum antibiotics in order to knock out this septicemic infection, this infection in her blood. They drew blood cultures on her. They came out negative, which was good. But her face swelled up. She was in the hospital for a whole week. you know, they don't like to put people in hospitals. They kick you out as quickly as they can. I had my heart attack. I was out of the hospital the next day. Here, let's take you down in a wheelchair. Oh, okay.
It's because you're a man.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway. Okay, so that's what happened with my wife. She had cellulitis. Cellulitis is really dangerous. It usually only happens to people when they're sedentary. It happens to people that have diabetes. So it's one of the things you have to look at, that you have to look for. Anytime you're around somebody who has diabetes, you need to look at their legs, especially their legs, because, you know, as I'm standing here, all my blood's draining down into my legs. It's coming back up, of course, but if I were going to get an infection, I'd get an infection in my legs, in my calves probably, and that's where she had her infection. And she was in the hospital for a whole week, getting broad spectrum antibiotics. At some point, she had 2 IVs going, one in each arm. It was that serious. And of course, she said, well, I think I'll wait until Monday to see Dr. Fowler. Of course, I talked her out of it. And going into the hospital right away. I saved her life. She doesn't realize it. I'm a hero. You know, what do I get for it? Probably a slap on the cheek or whatever. This cheek, not the other cheek. Kevin. The lymphocytes will release chemicals that produce responses from the entire body. Systemic effects may include fever, and of course she had a fever, but it was mostly a localized temperature, or localized heat. And she also had swelling and edema in the area. Phagocytes and macrophages will engulf any alien structure. The body's immune system has other equal opportunity destroyers. Natural killer cells, I love these guys. Natural killer cells are lymphocytes that attack diseased cells. They also attack alien cells, anything that's alien in the system. This is one of the reasons why babies have to produce a chemical that tells the immune system that they're not an alien structure. It's a lie, they are an alien structure, but they are able to produce this stuff to keep from, you know, being destroyed by the mother's immune system. The natural killer cells attack their prey by injecting lethal chemicals into the structure, including interferon. The reason I put including interferon is because if you have heard about HIV treatments, interferon is one of the chemicals that we give people with HIV. That either destroys the structure or it prevents it from replicating. Remember, that's what was happening with the bacteria. The bacteria, the fever keeps it from being able to reproduce, and then eventually the bacteria dies, and now it didn't reproduce, so now it's dead. We've defeated this disease with fever, with heat, with heat. All cells in the human body are made up of proteins. All foreign substances that attempt to invade the human body are made up of proteins. Each bacteria, virus, fungus, etc. has a protein signature. And this is one of the things that we're deathly afraid of. Right now, all the bacteria, all the viruses, all the funguses that are pathogens are made up of proteins. We're afraid of something invading us, something from outer space, something that we've never even thought about before, that wasn't made up of protein, that our immune systems wouldn't be able to knock out. This is what happened to American Indians when the Europeans first came over here. It wasn't the fact that we had alien structures that you guys couldn't detect. It was the fact that we had alien structures that you had never seen before. So you had no natural immunity to any of this stuff. Smallpox, measles, mumps, chickenpox, all of the virulent diseases that have killed off people over the years. You guys had no immunity to this at all. You'd never seen it before. So your bodies didn't have any natural immunity. So the first time your body got sick, it died. How many indigenous peoples died from diseases? There are estimates that 99% of people in the Americas died. Now the reality was that, of course, The Europeans, it's not like we were all over the place and we invaded Canada and then everything spread, or the Spanish came in and they saw all the Native Americans and killed them all, as many off as they possibly could. There were different tribes that were isolated and stayed away from Europeans. So this happens relatively slowly, and that's one of the reasons why people were able to survive, because they came in contact with somebody that had survived the disease. Because they came in contact with them, they gained immunity from them, and so the tribes that made contact with Europeans later, some of them did have some natural immunity to the diseases, and that's one of the reasons why everybody didn't die. Now the reality was that the Russians had come down from Alaska earlier. You know, what happened to all those American Indians? Well, it wasn't the same situation. The people in Europe, Russians are Asian and a European, but they don't live with their livestock, not like Europeans did. And since the Europeans lived with their livestock, they lived with their pigs, and pigs have a similar immune system to humans, all the diseases that they had were far more virulent than anything that the Russians had. So the ones that made first contact with the Russians, not that big a deal. The Spanish, it was pretty bad. But it was the people from Germany and England and France that really, they were really virulent. They had all kinds of horrible diseases. They just wiped out whole villages of people, as that goes, as far as that goes. Anyway, so we have all these proteins, all right? So what we're really afraid of, I know the coronavirus is out there, but it's a virus. It's a protein. We already know that. And there's not going to be a problem. Eventually, we won't be that susceptible to coronavirus. It's like the Zika virus, brand new. It had mutated and it had become far more virulent. With pregnant women, of course, it destroyed their fetuses. But now we're not even worried about it anymore. We already have we can inoculate people against Zika virus. We can do the same. Eventually, we're going to be able to inoculate people against the coronavirus because it's a protein and we're able to work with it. But what we're afraid of is some pathogen that is not protein-based. If that happens, we have no immunity to it at all, that we're aware of anyway. So if something comes from outer space and could wipe out the entire population of it'll wipe out all the humans and all the pigs and all the turkeys, as weird as that is. The only living creatures will be cockroaches and rodents of one ilk or another. Okay, so everything has a protein signature. This protein signature that everything has, viruses, bacteria, fungi, these are known as antigens. So everything has an antigen. And it's a protein that tells us what it is. So as we are breathing, I guess Doris isn't here, she has a cold. As she was breathing last time on Monday, as she was breathing and we were all coming in contact with her viruses, her rhinoviruses, the reality is you guys were identifying it as an antigen and your immune system was knocking it out. That's why you're not sick. She's still sick, of course, but you didn't get sick from her breathing on you or breathing around you. I'm sure you took in the same viruses that she had. So did I. I didn't get sick. It's because our immune systems were able to knock it out. When an antigen is first encountered, the immune system tries to identify it and potentially fight it by producing antibodies to neutralize the antigen. So I'm going to, as we are breathing Doris's pathogens, her antigens, we're getting her antigens in our system, we are producing something to knock it out. And that something is an antibody. So our antibody neutralizes her antigen. There you go. And that's why we didn't get sick. None of us got sick. We're all healthy, wealthy, and we are gaining wisdom all the time. After the first encounter, anytime the antigen tries to invade the body, the antibodies are circulating to neutralize the threat. And that's what was going on as you were breathing in her antigens. This is how we become immune to certain diseases, because we produce antibodies to knock them out. Now, people are really pissed off at me because I never get sick. And they think that that's just not fair. Why the hell shouldn't I get sick? I'm old, half of my immune system is missing. Why don't I get sick? Well, the reason is because I was a lab tech for 30 years. And as a lab tech, I came in contact with people with all kinds of horrible, god-awful diseases that you can imagine. Well, I came in contact with their antigens. And my body, thank God that it's able to produce antibodies, but my body was able to produce antibodies against those antigens. Now, what I'm afraid of the non-protein pathogen. I had no natural immunity to that. But if a new disease comes along, I've never come in contact with this Wuhan coronavirus. I've come in contact with coronaviruses before. So the question is, do I have immunity from that disease? And I don't know what the answer is.
So once your body builds up the antibodies, it never goes away?
We're going to talk about that in just a second. It all depends on the antigen. Some antigens, like the flu. I mean, if you get the flu every year, the flu is different every year. But you build up antibodies last year against that flu, why are you still getting the flu? It's because it's different every year. Okay. So yes, you do have antibodies, but you have antibodies against an antigen that you haven't seen in 5 years. It's still floating through your system. So if you ever come in contact with that, you're okay. Congratulations. But it's probably mutated by this time, so it looks completely different. And that's what happens every year. That's why everybody gets sick every year. Some people get the flu every year. I never get sick. I never get the flu. We can make people immune to diseases by vaccinating them against the antigen. We do that by giving them the antigen and producing the antibodies. Okay, so when you got your flu shot, what they were actually giving you, they were giving you a dead portion of this antigen, of the virus. And since the antigen was in your system, you developed antibodies against that antigen. And that's why theoretically you shouldn't have gotten the flu. Except the antibodies the antigen that they were giving you was the antibodies from last year, not from this year. Because we are able to live with our pigs, and since we do that, the viruses mutate, and this year it's going to be different from last year. There's I'm sorry.
That coronavirus, where did it come from? Like, how did it start?
Well, it came from those
It
animals.
wasn't the Europeans living with the...
No, it was the Asians. It's always the Asians, bastards.
But it does come from, like, that's what I'm saying, like, where does it come from? What were they doing to have that?
Initially, it started in those animals. Who cares about a sick animal? Well, you do if you eat it, and that's what they were doing. They were also, they stored it, so it sat there and produced feces.
It's just like the news comes up with all this wild stuff.
Yeah.
Like they're eating bats and snakes and
Dogs.
dogs, and that's where it's coming from. I'm like, it's just terrible.
Yes, but if you don't cook it properly, then the viruses don't die. So now I've got it too, because I ate, that snake. Yeah, whatever, And some things have a lot of bacteria and viruses in them. Turtles, for example. Oh my God. Chickens have salmonella.
Yeah.
In the eggs, you have to cook your eggs really good. If you get runny eggs, don't eat them, because they may have salmonella, and then you'll get diarrhea really
This is
good.
why, like, I have bleach. Scott's like, will you calm down? I'm like, no. It's in my house where I feel safe.
No, well, that's another problem. You need to develop immunity to this stuff. So you need to come in contact with the antigen. If you lived in a sterile environment, you'd be sick all the time
Yeah.
because you wouldn't have any immunity to these diseases.
Well, that kind of makes me think back to the last class that we had. You were saying that like children that live in poverty, they kind of live in
Right.
confined spaces and I guess places that are hoarder.
Right.
So why is it that they are
They
more
don't-
prone to sickness?
Because,
Why do they get sick?
well, they don't have any immunity until they come in contact with the disease. So because they're more immunocompromised, they don't eat as well, they're living in squalor. That's the reason that they're more immunocompromised. So when they do come in contact with these diseases, they're more likely to catch them. My kids, even though I let them run around outside and eat dirt, which is okay, that's fine, but I feed them really well so that their immune systems are really strong. That and the fact that I let them outside to run around the house. These other kids, they can't go outside because it's too dangerous to go outside. So they sit in their rooms all the time, don't get enough exercise. The food that I'm feeding them is Little Debbie's cupcakes. That's all I feed them. So they're immunocompromised. They're not getting enough, their nutrients aren't very good. So they're more immunocompromised. My kids, I feed them really good food and they get a lot of exercise. They go outside, so they're not confined in those spaces. So yes, potentially those kids are going to be have more immunity, but they're immunocompromised, so they get sick.
I'm not sure if it was in your class, but I remember reading something that talked about how like they did a study on Japanese men, and in Japan they were 5 inches, give or
Right.
take a couple inches shorter than the Japanese Americans here.
Right.
And it's because here they're drinking milk.
Right.
And was that in your class? Yeah. Okay, so that is interesting.
Right. All of this, everything goes together. I mean, you're in the environment that you live in, how you grow up, whether you exercise or not. All of these things add up to how healthy you're going to be later on in life. My mother lived on a farm. She grew up on a farm during the Depression, but she grew up on a farm where they had milk and eggs and meat. They butchered a hog every year, so they had all this meat. So she grew up on a farm where she did a lot of the farm work. And she lived to be 98 years old, which is pretty damn good if you think about it for somebody that ate eggs and bacon and whatnot a lot. But the reason is because she lived in such a healthy environment. She lived on a farm, and she was a nurse, and she knew how to take care of herself. And she knew how bad alcohol was, so she stayed away from it. And she preached it to her children. And of course, that's one of the reasons why I preach it as well, because my mother told me, look at this stupid son of a bitch, look what happened to him. Look at this other idiot. She would use another swear word, but then I'm not going to use. Look at this other idiot, and he smoked cigarettes, and now he died of cancer at 49.
So would you say that your choices, your good choices that you've made in your life are from the teachings of your mother and your grandmother?
Yes. My mother, I didn't know my grandmother. My grandmother was dead before I was born. All my grandmothers, both of my grandmothers were dead before I was born, and my grandfathers. So I only had my mother and my father to learn.
Well, I'm gonna have to tell Scott, Bruce said I can't make you runny eggs.
Well, I eat eggs every weekend, after I run, of course, but I make omelets, white cheese omelets. Yeah, that's pretty good. Anyway, but I eat eggs too.
But just on the weekends.
Yeah, well, I don't have time to cook
That's
through the week. I go to work. I always get to work about between 8 and 8:30. Okay. I feel guilty if I don't. So what we need to do is knock these guys out. We need to knock the bacteria and the viruses out, or the antigen. We need to neutralize it. And we neutralize it with the antibodies. This way, newborns are immunized against childhood illnesses that used to kill so many people. We do that by inoculating the children. This is one of the reasons why we give them shots right away. I mean, I know it breaks your heart to take your 2-week-old in there and they stick them with a needle that looks like it's this long and it's got that much stuff in it. What the reality is, it's only this much stuff and the needle's only that long. But, and they cry. They think it's, you just invaded my body with all this stuff. But the reality is we're trying to keep them from getting the childhood illnesses, the ones that used to kill people. There's 3 different types of measles that used to kill people. There's the mumps, there's chickenpox. People used to get smallpox. There's 5th disease that used to kill people. So there's, you know.
So is chickenpox not a thing anymore?
No, we inoculate children with chickenpox, but of course you can still get chickenpox at any time.
Yeah, my niece, they had their vaccines when they were babies because
Right.
she's the same age as my daughter, and she got chickenpox.
Right. It only works about 70% of the time.
So that was really interesting because like nowadays you don't really hear people getting chickenpox.
You don't. Well, both of my kids had chickenpox, but they didn't have an inoculation at that time. So,
I had chickenpox.
you had chickenpox too?
Yeah.
Were you inoculated against chickenpox?
I don't even know.
I mean, it's possible that your system will just knock it out, or you won't produce the proper antibodies. You know, this is always possible. So it's not a done deal. The problem is measles. Measles are dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
They kill babies, and the reason they kill babies is because the fever that is created from rubella or rubeola is a fever that you cannot control. We can give ibuprofen, we can give Tylenol, we can give aspirin to individuals in order to control their fever. We can give them, put them in an ice bath, we can wash them down with alcohol to take away their fever. But with the measles, none of that stuff works. And if somebody's got the measles and you give them aspirin, they may go into convulsions. It's a condition known as Reye's syndrome. It's dangerous, so you gotta be really, this is really crazy stuff. So we've got really interesting people out there going, oh no, that it causes autism to give children their vaccinations. And now the measles have come back. We had it eradicated.
Wasn't there a case just in Chinle not too long ago? And I don't know what that was about, but because parents nowadays don't want to give their children the vaccine.
Right.
Because they're saying that it does cause autism and all this stuff.
Which isn't true at all.
So, and then there's parents saying, okay, well, your child is a hazard to my child because they go to school together.
Right.
So, you know, what are they supposed to do? So that's what's going on right now.
I know, it's going on in California, it's going on in Oregon, they passed laws in Oregon. They passed laws in California that it's up to you as to whether you inoculate your child. But the reality is that not all inoculations take, for one thing. So if somebody has the measles and it didn't take with my kid may get sick even though they've been inoculated against it. Not all inoculations work. So, I mean, that's just the way it is. So they need to be inoculated is the bottom line. I've heard the arguments are bogus. Inoculations have nothing to do with autism. Autism does, you start recognizing it after they start getting their inoculations. But they had autism before. It was just never diagnosed. It's silly. They knew they were inoculated. Some really smart people are saying don't inoculate your kids, and it's stupid. The specific cells that are responsible for immunity are B lymphocytes that are produced in the bone marrow and T lymphocytes that are produced in the thymus, and hence the name T and B because one is the bone and the other is the thymus. I know, we're brilliant in the way that we name things, aren't we? These cells produce proteins called immunoglobulins that form the antibody that neutralizes the antigen. This is where the antibodies come from. from the immunoglobulins. I've been in 2 hepatitis epidemics. Both of them were in the military. And in order to keep everybody from getting hepatitis that were susceptible to it, we had to give everybody IgG. We had to give them immunoglobulins in order to keep them from getting sick. Of course, this was in the military. This is on a military base. So when the colonel says everybody's going to get the shot, everybody got the shot, okay? It's not like they could say no. And this was not just all the military personnel, it was also all the civilians that lived on or came to the base. Both hepatitis epidemics started, actually they started with a pilot that went someplace where they had hepatitis. He contracted it and then he brought it back to his kids. The kids got it and then it got into the daycare. And once it got into daycare, the problem is that when somebody is a year old or 9 months old, their immunity is really, really weak. They don't have very much immunity unless they're breastfed, and then their immunity is a little bit stronger, but not as strong as it's going to be later on in life. So once it got into daycare, it just spread like wildfire. And of course, nobody's immune to hepatitis. Well, some people are immune to hepatitis. So in order to keep everybody on base from getting hepatitis, we gave everybody a shot of IgG. We gave them immunoglobulins. Yay, we saved everybody's life. I know, I had to give shots. I'd never given shots before, but I used a needle a lot to draw blood. What you think I'm a heroin addict or something. When a B cell comes in contact with its antigen, it divides into 2 types of cells. Here you go. This is it, Kevin. This is the question you asked. Plasma cells that mass produce antibody molecules. These are antibodies that are going to knock out the disease right now. That's the plasma cells. An antibody producing memory cell. So we knock it out right away, and now we have another cell that will circulate through our body for the rest of our lives. And if it ever comes in contact with that antigen, it will just knock it out. So there's a reason why you don't get every disease that comes along. And the reason is because you've come in contact with it in the past, you've developed antibodies against it, and when you come in contact with Doris's rhinovirus, you knocked it out. Your body knocked it out. You didn't get sick. And you're not going to get sick. Okay? Now you can talk yourself into getting sick if you want. And people will do this. They'll catch everything that comes along. And the reason they do is because they want to be sick. So they kind of talk themselves into it, and then they make themselves immunocompromised, and then they get sick. But I tell myself, I can't get anything. I never get sick. And I never get sick. One is because I'm arrogant, but the other reason is because my immune system is strong because I tell myself it's strong. So I keep it strong. If you think you're going to get sick, guess what happens next? You get sick. But I tell myself it can't happen. Plasma cells will destroy the antigen and then they die within a couple days. Memory cell, it's in there forever. So once you've had something or you've come in contact with something, you're immune for the rest of your life. Congratulations. And potentially, since I worked in medicine for 30 years, I was a laboratory technician. My job was to draw people's blood. I touched them, I came in contact with them. They were immunocompromised, I wasn't, and I drew their blood. I came in contact with their antigens. Now I've developed an immunity against that antigen. I've developed antibodies against that antigen. So I never get sick. I've come in contact with everything. But like I said, I am afraid of something new that comes along or something that's not protein-based. That's a possibility. I'm afraid, not afraid to the extent that I'm hiding in the corner, but afraid to the extent that if something does come up, like the coronavirus, it's possible, but I've come in contact with coronavirus before. Maybe not the Wuhan coronavirus, but with coronavirus. So probably I'm immune to it. Why isn't everybody in China sick? It's because they have come in contact with a coronavirus in the past. Now they have antibodies that knock out the coronavirus, kinda, almost, just about, so they don't get sick. 500 people have died from the coronavirus.
Do you feel like this is something to be worried about?
No, not for me. You guys can worry if you like.
I just kind of feel like the media makes it this really big thing.
You need to be aware that it's there.
And and that's the thing is like, I do understand that, but it's like, the way they make it sound like we're all doomed and we're all gonna die, like.
You're watching the
it's
wrong news.
And I don't, honestly, well, it's on Yahoo, which isn't a reliable source, but I just.
said it, you're
Okay, listen, I just do not like to, and I am aware of like current events, but I'm not going to get myself involved with all these negative things that are going on. Because if I allow my brain to go there, I'm going to be like that, like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get sick, and this is happening to me. So it's just like, for my own sanity, I'm like, no.
But see, I'm more positive than you are, so I don't have to worry about that. There's another virus out there called the Ebola virus. Ebola virus is ugly. I mean, this is really nasty. This is nothing like anything that we have in the United States.
Mhm.
I've never come in contact with Ebola virus.
And where did, because wasn't this like really,
It's in sub-Saharan Africa.
okay, like a couple of years ago, and then it came here, and then some people had it
Well,
here?
just a couple people had
Uh-huh.
it. They isolated them and it was no problem. No, it always starts in Africa. So we've got the flu and coronavirus evidently that starts in Asia, then we got Ebola virus that always starts in Africa. It's probably a monkey virus.
So there's different kinds of Ebola, is that what you're saying?
There are different types of Ebola, but they're all ugly. They're all really, really ugly. They cause hemorrhaging. So what happens? And all the blood that comes out of you is contaminated.
Mm.
So it's pretty nasty. But I've never come in contact with that. I've come in contact with the bubonic plague, but I've never come in contact with Ebola virus. While B cells fight pathogens primarily with antibodies, humanity would have died out long ago the first time it came across a virulent pathogen if it weren't for the T cells. T cells attack pathogens without the need of an antibody. They eradicate any pathogens in the body. Now this may be another reason why I don't get sick, is because T cells are normally in your spleen. Well, I don't have one. My spleen, I lost it in a soccer game in 1985. So I'm spleenless, and since I'm spleenless, I've got all these T cells just splashing around my system. And since they don't need an antibody, okay, so you're breathing Doris's antigens, right? And so potentially you're going to get sick. So what has to happen is that the antigen gets in your system, the antigen tells your spleen to release T cells, and now it knocks it out. But before you knock it out, you might be sick for a day or so. This is the 24-hour flu that they talk about. So your T cells haven't been activated yet because they're sitting there waiting for somebody to order them to be released.
So do you think that vitamin C will boost that?
Yes.
Because they have those emergency.
Yeah, I know. You can get vitamin C in a lot of different ways. I'm drinking lemonade right now with half a lemon in it. And that's almost raw vitamin C. Okay, so I don't have to take emergency. The other thing you can take is, there's another one out there, another chemical, selenium.
I've never heard of that.
It has to do with colds. Anyway, if you take selenium, you don't get, theoretically, you don't get colds. So if you boost your vitamin C level and boost your selenium level, potentially you won't get a cold in any season. See, I don't have to worry about it because I never get sick, so. And I drink lemonade with half a lemon. There's literally there's a whole lemon in this one because they were really tiny lemons. So it's got a whole lemon in it. Oh yeah, I never get sick. T cells do this with the 3 types of cells. What are we doing? Oh, we're wandering around our system and knocking everything out. Cytotoxic cells are killer cells that attach to one type of antigen. Estimates are that T killer cells can recognize at least 1 million pathogens. Okay, so that's where we are today. We're at this 1 million pathogen place. But if, when the Europeans first came over here, you probably, your cytotoxic cells probably only recognized 20,000 pathogens because you'd never come in contact with all the virulent diseases from Europe. So you didn't recognize as much as we do today. We have lots and lots of negative things out there, but of course we have our cytotoxic cells that are knocking out a million different pathogens. We have helper T cells and suppressor T cells. They secrete chemical messengers called lymphokines, which work on other immune cells. Helper T cells wander the body looking for antigens. It's helper T cells that are invaded by the HIV virus that make them non-functional. Helper T cells are wandering around our body looking for alien structures. But what the HIV cell does, the virus does, it injects its own RNA into the cell, and now it doesn't have our DNA anymore. So we've got these T helper cells wandering around going, everything's alien, everything's alien. And it doesn't have anything to, it becomes non-functional. As much fun as that is. So it's wandering around looking for antigens, but it has to recognize your own DNA in order to know what's good and what's bad. What's okay. Anyway, so that's what happens with HIV virus. The reason people die from it is because they get these mass infections that they can't knock out. They get infections that nobody has ever seen before, because everything is infective to them. They have no immune system at all. It kills their immune system, and then they die. When they find them, they send out chemicals to attract the immune cells. They are inhibitory as well as excitatory in that they control the overzealous response to a pathogen. We do have a problem. Your immune system is this wonderful structure that kills off all the bad stuff, but sometimes it starts attacking your own body. These are autoimmune diseases. Lupus is an autoimmune disease. It's breaking down the connective tissue in your body. Arthritis, there are different types of arthritis. There are autoimmune diseases.
Is there one that starts with a G? Something syndrome?
I can't think of it.
Oh, it's gonna bother me after.
Of course it is. Okay, so wait a minute. There's another psoriasis. Psoriasis is an autoimmune disease, and it's the reason it's so difficult to control. So what do they do if you've got psoriasis? They give you Humana. Humana is a chemical, is a pharmaceutical that tells your immune system. It shuts down your immune system. So now all of a sudden you're not attacking your own skin. The problem is you're more susceptible to other diseases, and this can be a really serious problem. So if you ever have an autoimmune disease and they offer you a substance or a pharmaceutical that can potentially slow down your immune system and slow down your psoriasis or slow down your lupus, don't take it, because if you do, you're kind of knocking out your immune system and you'll die of something else. So congratulations. Now you've died of something else. Oh, geez, something happened. I must have turned it on. Anyway, it's time to stop anyway. Autoimmune diseases. Okay. So now here's the problem with autoimmune diseases. Kevin and I are okay because we've got weak immune systems anyway. Don't worry about it. We're okay. We're going to be better off than they are because they're females. Females have a stronger immune system, so they're more susceptible to autoimmune diseases. Not us. We don't have to worry. And I've got a piece missing, a piece of my immune system missing. So the probability of me developing multiple sclerosis, arthritis, psoriasis, I'm 70 anyway. I'm too old to catch any of that stuff. Anyway, ha 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 ha.